Alright guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Armchair, Armdrager podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ben Hersick. Episode 42, and instead of doing like a takeover reactions thing, which I do for, I think, every takeover I've done predictions for, like the week after, I kind of want to do something different. I'll talk a little bit about how takeover Portland, I don't remember which one it was, because there's just so many of them that have happened now. I'll talk a little bit about how Takeover Portland was, but I also want to hit on the main point. You'll see it in the title. Ideas I've had for the WrestleMania weekend cards for Takeover and WrestleMania itself. But as we always get these podcasts started, you can follow myself on Twitter at Churro Soldier. You can follow this podcast at Podcast Armchair. You can follow All Things Combat on Twitter, which is a website that I write for where we cover professional wrestling, boxing, and MMA over at Things Combat. There's an article that I've started to work on. I kind of can't do a lot till a certain something else is out. I'm kind of keeping it a little under wraps, so very actually excited for that. And you can also follow them on Twitter at Things Combat. And we also have the merch store that I constantly forget to plug, which is dumb on my part because I probably should plug that a little more. And you can also follow the Cauldron from Cleveland State on Twitter at CSU Cauldron. I'm the sports editor over there. Our most recent issue is now out. I'll have a link to it, to my article at least, in the description below. And yeah, that's what has been going on Twitter, I guess. Just follow everything, I guess. I never know why I start and end with follow on Twitter. Probably because I'm more active over there and I can engage more with people if people ever engage with me. So let's start with Takeover Portland. Very good show, top to bottom again. Another fantastic takeover, like always. I look at it. There was Lee Dijakovic was obviously going to be great. It was then a hard position to follow with Kai and Knox. Reina Gonzalez getting involved is a bit of a head scratcher, but also something you can kind of understand, I guess. Which, I mean, hey, we'll see. I'm curious. I have it involved in Takeover Tampa. I'll explain that in a bit. But also, you look at it, after Kai and Knox, the show had a stride that it just couldn't get out of. Tag team title match was great. Gargano Balor was fantastic. And Ripley and Belair, as expected, had an amazing match. And the main event, that is a very, very interesting call to turn Johnny Gargano heel. I'm curious how this will play into Tampa. It's obvious we're getting Ciampa Gargano, excuse me. But what is the exact capacity we're going to see this in? And I'll explain that in a brief bit here. But again, top to bottom, another great NXT Takeover show. A lot of highs, not very many lows. The post Takeover show for NXT this week, very promo heavy, but also it kind of was going to be. I feel like, especially with Tampa being, I think at that point 7 weeks away, might have been 8. Not 100% sure. They had to fill time somehow, some way, and that was the exact way they were going to do it. So there's that. And also, the main roster has that stupid Saudi show, I think, this week or the week after. I'm not 100% sure on that either, but don't care. Not my personal cup of tea for that. So now we have, I think, 2 stops left on the road to WrestleMania. I know for sure we have the Saudi Arabia show and Elimination Chamber. I don't think after Elimination Chamber there's another pay-per-view, at least for the main roster. And no, there's no pay-per-view after that for NXT, especially. Okay, so we should be now, after 2 small pit stops, be on the road for Takeover and very excited. And WrestleMania. The road to WrestleMania, it's not a road to Takeover. Ugh. I'm like a little tired recording this one. I took a nice nap. Excuse me, I'm tired, I'm burpy. I had a nice nap after getting home from work, and I had food already, so it's like, I'm just like ready to crash at any point. So now we are starting to get to WrestleMania season, like especially deep into WrestleMania season. So I figured let's look at some matches that are already confirmed for WrestleMania, but also some that could still develop, and also Takeover. Now, NXT is in. Let's start with the NXT Takeover Tampa Bay show. NXT is in the unenviable position of having so much talent they don't really know what to do with it all. There's so many guys and girls that could be on Takeover shows that just haven't been yet, and I'm very, very curious to see what their directions are. One or two, you can kind of tell what the match is going to be, but there's a couple of other X factors in there that you don't necessarily know right away. So let's start with an idea I had for Takeover Tampa. You look at boxing matches, and you look at MMA fights. They always have a pre-show or an undercard, and then or a prelim, as they used in UFC advertising, I believe, and then they have the main card. So I had the idea: why not let NXT UK have some time to show off what they can do at WrestleMania weekend on a prelim card, essentially. This could be like in place of the pre-show, but also you could keep it under an hour if you wanted to. Give all the matches time limits, and say like if you're not able to win in this time, it's a draw. Maybe you give the title matches 30 minutes. Maybe you give them less, maybe 20. That's a tough call, to be honest, but it's a very small idea I kind of had that I thought would be good, because a lot of the NXT UK guys don't get a chance to show what they can do on as big of a stage as the NXT USA wrestlers. So why not let them have the chance to actually be able to do that? So like for the prelims, I had 4 matches from NXT UK. One of them isn't really a match. It's just like, here's names that should be on the show in some way, shape, or form. Get them on there if you can. So like literally for number 1, I have some combination of Joe Coffey, Cassius Ohno, Flash Morgan Webster, Ligero, Mark Andrews, Ilya Dragunov, Eddie Dennis, Dave Mastiff, and A-Kid. Give a pair of them a chance to maybe a 10-minute match or somewhere around there and go from there. Build up these characters a little more, give people a reason to invest, and maybe people will be like, oh, that guy's actually really interesting and I should be invested in him and they can become a fan of them. I'm a fan of, I believe, everybody on that list except for A-Kid, simply because of the fact I haven't seen any of his matches. But based off of what I've seen on like spoiler reports, essentially, for NXT UK, he's been having some really good matches with some higher up names on the card. Maybe, question mark. You don't really know the pecking order outside of Imperium in NXT UK. But that's that. But like, get the combination of those guys on there. They've all had good years up to this point, since WrestleMania is kind of the end of the year for WWE, and the start of the next one is the next night on Raw. So these guys have had a good year. Let them get a chance to show what they can do on that big old stage. Give them time on the network and whatnot, and go from there. Next will be the NXT UK Tag Team titles, which the champions are Gallus, which is the stable led by Joe Coffey, but the tag team champions are his brother Mark Coffey and Wolfgang. Excuse me. You can have them take on one of 2 teams. One is a team they've been feuding with for a little while here and there. The other one would be a nice little shout and start to build up the NXT UK tag team scene. So the first one's Imperium, which would be Fabian Eichner and Marcel Bartel. Or the other is Primate and Wild Boar. Gallus has been feuding with Imperium for a little while now. They've been, I think, no, Gallus took them from Southern Wales Subculture, which was Andrews and Webster, who took them from Grizzled Young Veterans. Imperium hasn't held the titles yet. And considering that Walter is, the NXT UK champion, his underlings, for lack of a better term, should try to get to that point as well and be on that level. Now, coming out of Worlds Collide, we don't know the status of I don't think we know the status of Wolf or Bartel yet because of the fact that I don't think the next tapings have happened yet. I could be 100% wrong on that, but we'll see. They don't. They both had concussions after their match against Undisputed Era. So if Bartel is not medically cleared, then that's where you make the call for Wildboar and Primate. Especially those two are really talented wrestlers, and I would love to see them get a chance to show what they could do on a bigger stage. I've been a fan of Primate since God. I want to say his time in WCPW was when I first found him, but I feel like it was earlier. But anyway, and that's an issue I want to talk about with NXT next week. Tag team wrestling really needs a new focus there, and I'll explain that in depth next week. But back to this. You would also, on this prelim idea, you'd have the NXT UK Women's Championship with Kaylee Ray having to defend her title. The thing is, she's beaten almost everybody over there already, because you have a wrestler like, Kaylee Ray. It's kind of hard to not have her be the most dominant women's champion to date, with a huge asterisk, since I believe she's only the third champion. You have Rhea Ripley, who won originally. You have Toni Storm, who beat Rhea Ripley for it, and you have Kaylee Ray, who beat Storm for it. And she's run through a lot of people, but there's one wrestler over there that I think is kind of shown she can be like the underdog babyface for that division, and that's Xia Brookside. You give Xia Brookside a chance here, you let her show what she can do, and maybe you can buy into her a little bit later down the line. Maybe Kaylee Ray has some sort of screwy finish here, and that helps set up the match for TakeOver Dublin, or maybe Viper's involved somehow. We'll see. But I do think it would be nice to give Xia Brookside a little shout here. Let her actually show a large audience what she can do, and she's essentially, and I hate saying this, she's essentially what Candice LeRae could be for NXT USA, and that's really annoying to have to say. LeRae hasn't had that real big chance yet. She had the War Games win with Ripley. That was more about Ripley pinning Shayna Baszler and being the first person to do so since Kairi Sane, I think. But that was like a big deal, and that was more about Rhea Ripley. LeRae was just kind of like, I'm here. Yay. Because they do know she's a good wrestler. They just haven't had a chance to let her show it yet. And then obviously in the main event for the prelims, you would have the NXT UK title with Walter defending against somebody. I have written down Travis Banks, but Banks, and same with Tyler Bate a little bit later. I have Mustache Mountain in a match on the quote-unquote main card. You have with Travis Banks, he was pulled from the upcoming Progress show in the UK with an undisclosed injury. So I don't know if that would work. Because here's the thing. The next takeover is, for NXT UK, is UK TakeOver Dublin. So people think Devlin might get a shot at the NXT UK Championship there. But like I've said, I think a couple times at least, the next person to be NXT UK Champion should be Ilya Dragunov. With just how talented and how good he is, let the man have a chance and let him go against Walter. Now, yes, there's more history with Devlin and Walter, but I don't think they would want to have Devlin be the one to beat Walter for the title. And also, if you do this prelim idea, you kind of have to have Walter defend against somebody not named Devlin or Dragunov, because of the fact it's not that big of a stage, so you probably wouldn't see a title change. Maybe the NXT UK Women's title, depending on how many women are going to Raw and SmackDown after Mania. You're obviously going to lose Shayna Baszler for sure. And who knows who else? Maybe Triple H and Vince know at this point, but us fans, we don't know. So you have that. So you let Banks essentially have a shot. He showed you what he can do in that Cruiserweight Fatal 4-Way at Worlds Collide. So go from there and see just how good he can be in the ring with the top dog of NXT UK. So from the prelim card, you would go to the main card of NXT that's on television every single week. And it was tough to try and get everybody on this card. Like right next to the name, I have question marks next to Velveteen Dream, Dominic Dijakovic, Killian Dane, and Roderick Strong. Because I just couldn't really find a spot for him. Maybe you get rid of this first match and have a fatal four-way number one contender thing, maybe, between the four. But who exactly really knows? But you also you don't necessarily have to have all the names on the takeover card every single time. You can be fine with one or two missing here and there. So you go from there to add to the building stars that are on the division already. For example, I have Jordan Devlin on the main card instead of the prelims. I have who else? I have Mustache Mountain on the main card instead of the prelims. And I have two women's matches on a takeover, which I still think has never happened. But I'm not 100% sure on that. But let's get into this. So my main card, I have the idea of Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez versus Tegan Nox and Mia Yim. And I have next to this maybe the winner advances to Mania for the women's tag title match, but more on that in just a little bit, in a while actually. So let's talk about why the team of Tegan Nox and Mia Yim. One, it evens the playing field. You might see this match earlier before TakeOver, and we might go back to the 5-match format. I didn't mind the 6 at TakeOver Portland. I kind of liked that, actually. But that might just be me. Who knows? But let's look at why Mia Yim makes sense to team with Tegan Nox. At NXT TakeOver War Games, you had Dakota Kai take the spot of Mia Yim because Mia Yim was attacked backstage. It wasn't known who at the time attacked Mia Yim. And then, before getting into the War Games match, Dakota Kai attacked Tegan Nox. It was then kind of figured out through putting the pieces together, essentially, of the puzzle, that Mia Yim was attacked by Dakota Kai so Kai could have the spot. This story has been going on since TakeOver War Games. And this is what NXT does really well. They tell good long-term stories. So you have that, and you have that moment where you can start the show off with a big babyface win with Nox and Yim avenging the quote-unquote, to me, the best term I could think of was schoolyard bullies. They avenge the issues over the schoolyard bullies and go on to be one of the more interesting women's tag teams in a women's tag team division that really needs help. So next, you have to have these title matches get into the show too. There are 3 title matches I have on the card, and I'll explain why there's only 3 in a minute. Because there's going to be one title that's clearly missing. But let's start with the NXT Tag Team Championship match for TakeOver Tampa Bay. Like my speculated idea of it. You have the Broserweights defending against the Undisputed Era. A rematch from TakeOver Portland. You're thinking, not just a rematch from TakeOver Portland. This is a triple threat tag team match with Mustache Mountain. This would be very, very interesting. Not because of how good all 3 teams are. Also, like I've said a couple times, nobody told me I needed the Broserweight tag team in my life, and I am loving every second of them. This is maybe a long-term story you could tell. Where does Pete Dunne's allegiance really lie? Is it with Matt Riddle as the Broserweights? Or is it still with British Strong Style and his boys, Trent Seven and Tyler Bate? I almost said Travis Banks instead of Tyler Bate. But that would be a very interesting thing. Undisputed Era is kind of just there to be there because it's kind of, and that's the issue with the tag team division. There's nobody really outside of Undisputed Era that you can see as a legitimate threat. So we'll work on that more next week. But that would also be a really good match. You have 3 of the best tag teams going in the world right now. And all 3 teams are actually involved in 2 matches that could be considered NXT match of the year. Because Undisputed Era and Broserweights was a really, really good match at TakeOver Portland. And Undisputed Era has clearly been an amazing tag team for NXT. But also you add in Mustache Mountain versus DIY. That was an amazing match as well. So then you get to the Cruiserweight title for TakeOver. It's in a bit of a weird spot. Lio Rush just lost, so he's really a non-factor in the title scene right now. I'd kind of like to see him go to the North American title scene. Him and Keith Lee would be a very, very interesting matchup. I don't think it happens right away, but we'll see. So that really leaves Devlin with no competition, you would think. There's one guy who hasn't really been involved in the cruiserweight division yet. Ever since it's moved to NXT, that's kind of been a surprise to me. And that's Kushida. You have one of the best IWGP junior heavyweights of all time, and he's not really in the cruiserweight title scene? There's probably some reason or another. It might have to do with his injury and them wanting to have him return slowly and carefully. But it's about time for Kushida to start to make noise in that division. You could also have a triple threat here with Angel Garza. Angel Garza, excuse me. But I think Garza could also be at WrestleMania, and I'll get to that in a bit. But let's say one-on-one, Devlin versus Kushida. You give them some time, they could show you possibly the best cruiserweight title match that we've seen. And we've seen some good ones. Lio Rush and Angel Garza was amazing. That Fatal 4-Way at Worlds Collide was amazing. Devlin versus Rush was a little slow, but it picked up literally as soon as I hit send on anybody else think this match is slow tweet. So you go from there and you can start to build this division around Kushida. Maybe you move Devlin over full time. It's hard because you need big names in NXT UK, and the Irish Ace staying in NXT UK would be a big name. It's a real hard situation. It's a real tough situation to be in, but it's a fantastic situation to be in when you're like, what big names can we move from show to show and keep that star power? And speaking of star power, we already know the NXT Women's Championship is not going to be defended on TakeOver. Rather, it will be at WrestleMania. So, what do? You have a women's division, but you don't have a women's championship match. Well, solution, to me at least, in my wrestling brain that never freaking stops, and I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, wrestling idea, and never write anything down. I probably should. You can have a multi-women number one contender match. And I have written down 6-pack challenge. Depending on how big you want to go, you could do 6-pack challenge, you could do a fatal 4-way, you could do a triple threat. But who exactly would be in that match? Well, here's the thing. There's not really a wrong answer in the NXT women's division. And here's the names I have written down from the NXT women's division. Candice LeRae, Chelsea Green, Deonna Purrazzo, Io Shirai, if she's healthy, Kaden Carter, Mercedes Martinez, Shotzi Blackheart, Bianca Belair, Toni Storm, Ginny, Xia Li even. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 5, 6, 8. That's 11 women right there that are some of the best women's wrestlers in the world. And people might scratch their head at Xia Li. She's come a long way. If you go back and watch the first Mae Young Classic and watch the match she had against, I want to say it was Shayna Baszler, that was semi-recently on NXT TV. She's come a very long way, and I'm very, very excited to see what she can do. And maybe Rachel Evers, better known as Rachel Ellering to some people, she should be coming back somewhat soon, because she had surgery the same time as Ruby Riott. Although hers might have been ACL. I know Karen Q was out with a leg injury. I don't remember if Evers was the same. We'll see. But literally, with those 11 women, you can do no wrong in having that number one contenders match. There's so many good women's wrestlers in NXT, and NXT UK even. I didn't even write down Viper. I didn't write down Piper Niven. So that's 12. You have 6 different qualifying matches to advance to the spot. There you go. And give them a little time at least, because you can't have them tell a story with so little time. I was kind of surprised too. Well, now that they're 1-1, we might see the third match, and that's when she might debut. We haven't seen Deonna Purrazzo with Chelsea Green yet. And if you look at their t-shirts on WWEshop.com, they are eerily similar in logo. So the fact that they're not together yet is kind of surprising to me, especially with the women's tag team scene how it is. So we also have the NXT North American Championship that will definitely be on this show. Keith Lee is in an unenviable position as champion, because that mid-card is so talented, yet so unestablished. Outside of Keith Lee, Dominik Dijakovic, Velveteen Dream, I think you can still consider in the mid-card. Roderick Strong and maybe Damian Priest. There's nobody that's really like an established character. I was listening to something today too. There's no characters really anymore in wrestling. It's just good wrestler. Where's the character work? That's what I want to see. Keith Lee has done a fantastic job with that. Dominik Dijakovic has looked great, but he just had a match for the title. And like I've said this too, I could watch Lee and Dijakovic fight forever, just like everybody else can. But how do they keep it fresh every single time? That's my concern. If it's not fresh every single time, then there's an issue. But we'll see if they can. But I have penciled in Damian Priest. We haven't seen Damian Priest on a Takeover since that number one contender match that him, Killian Dane, and Pete Dunne had at War Games. Let's give Priest a chance here. He's another fantastic wrestler. We're slowly learning a character from him, somewhat. And I would like to see a little more. You could easily sub in Killian Dane for Priest. But I think Priest would be a good shout. I think him and Lee would have a better match overall. Because I don't think Dane and Priest's style... Or not Dane and Priest. I don't think Dane and Keith Lee's style really match up well. So that would be a very, very hard match to sell, at least to me. And then we get to the main event, and if the photo going around that I've seen is legit, then there's no way the NXT Championship follows it, and that's why I have it on the WrestleMania main show. I'll explain more in a sec. Hell in a Cell, Tommaso Ciampa versus Johnny Gargano. Is that a good sell? Yes, I would love to see those two just go hell for leather inside that structure. Please don't be the red one. Please be a silver one. Be different from the main roster. Let those two just go to war. But add this stipulation. Think back to NXT this week. Tommaso Ciampa said, to paraphrase essentially, for me to rule NXT, there can be no Johnny Gargano. So add in a second stipulation. Loser leaves NXT. And this story is something that has been written so well. Think back to when NXT was starting to, I think it was maybe just before NXT made the jump to television. Gargano said he's NXT for life. Tommaso Ciampa has gone on the record and said he wants to stay in NXT his entire career. Well, what's left of his career? Because he's not, in his first year as a wrestler. He wants to be there forever. Only one of them can stay. One of them then has to go to the main roster, quote unquote main roster, to Raw or SmackDown. You add that stipulation, people are going to be talking about it. People are going to be trying to figure out who's actually leaving. And if you look at how WrestleMania weekend kind of goes for WWE, you have the face win every single time in the main event, except for the odd occasion where they win, where the heel wins. Which is essentially just saying, oh yeah, the good guy wins, except for when the bad guy wins. But it's very rare to see a show end with a heel raising the title. The first exception to that rule was Triple H at WrestleMania 2000, I believe. Seth Rollins is a tricky situation there. Lesnar at 34 comes to mind. But you very rarely see the bad guy walk away with the win. You want to send the crowd home happy. Having Ciampa win there would send the crowd home happy. It'd also be sad because you lose Gargano at NXT. But I would love to see Gargano on, I'll say SmackDown, because they really need a little more help in the mid-card right now than Raw does. But we'll see. But that is my idea, at least, for Takeover Tampa Bay, where you have a prelim for NXT UK and then a main card for NXT, and you have no NXT Championship match, no NXT Women's Championship match, because both of them get to be on the main show of WrestleMania. But before we get to the main show of WrestleMania, let's talk about the pre-show. So for the WrestleMania pre-show, you already obviously have 2 Battle Royals. Now, the Andre the Giant Battle Royal is kind of a bit of an afterthought, always. But maybe you could start to build somebody up this year who wins it. I had 2 names written down at first, but I added them to the main card because, at least with the numbers their feud did on YouTube, it's obvious. If it's not obvious, I'm talking about Rusev and Lashley. With the numbers their feud did on YouTube, they probably should be on the Mania main show. We'll see. But I have written down Ali or Dijakovic. If Dijakovic is not on TakeOver, have him win the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, so that way he can be seen as a big threat in NXT like he probably should be. Or Ali, because of the fact that he got so screwed last year. And it was none of his fault, none of his doing. You had, let's see, going into Elimination Chamber, Ali had pinned Bryan in tag team action and had 2 fantastic matches against him. But then Ali got hurt, Kofi took a spot, Kofi Mania took over, Ali kind of fell by the wayside. He was going to win Money in the Bank before somebody, I don't remember who, I think it came out who it was, I don't remember exactly, but before somebody had the Brock Lesnar come in and steal the briefcase idea. He was supposed to win that briefcase. Ali could have been world champion already. And where would he be now? That's a good question to ask. So we'll see about that. But the Women's Battle Royal was in an interesting spot because at first none of us really knew what the plan was for the SmackDown Women's Championship. So with Bayley now seeming to have a possible plan, maybe 2, you can have somebody else win. Because at first I thought, okay, winner of the Women's Battle Royal can move on to the main show and face Bayley. But now that doesn't look like it's going to be the case, you can have a returning Nia Jax because she should be back now. It was roughly, I think, about this time that she tore both of her ACLs. So you could have her back now and have her return and be a dominant force like she should be. Or you could have Bianca Belair, who had she had the month. She had a hell of a month this past month. And it would be a nice thing to have her win. But if you have NXT win both Battle Royals, I don't know how that would kind of feel in the whole universe of pro wrestling. It'll be interesting. The pre-show actually could have 2 other women's matches on it. One that is possible, depends on how much of a story they want to tell in it, is Sasha. Yeah, I can never say her name right first try. Sasha Banks and Lacey Evans. That one's a bit weird. There's a story there, but due to Sasha, see, I can never say it right the first time. Due to Sasha's injury, question mark, asterisk, exclamation point, because we don't really know if it's an injury or if it's just them having an idea and working on it to make it better or something. I don't really know how to describe it. Essentially, her not being hurt, them having a storyline, but they were going to pull the trigger too early and they said, let's wait. That's the best way I can describe it. You could do her and Lacey Evans on the pre-show. Street Profits versus AOP is another option on there. But one I would really like to see in the pre-show, and considering the little history and the possible building they could have here, Liv Morgan versus Ruby Riott. Now let me explain this. Let me explain. So you have these two who were friends. These two knew each other. They were, of the Riot Squad, I would say they were the 2 closest. If you watch stuff back on Instagram, that seems to be the case. So you had Riot come back, attack Liv Morgan, and now they're feuding, essentially, it seems. So now you have one of two options. One, Ruby eliminates Liv from Elimination Chamber. Short term, Liv gets revenge at WrestleMania. But long term, you have Ruby Riott win an elimination, or defeat and eliminate Liv Morgan at Elimination Chamber. You then have Ruby Riott defeat her at WrestleMania. Money in the Bank. Liv's about to grab the briefcase when Ruby pushes her off the ladder and grabs it for herself. Ruby then cashes in eventually and wins the Raw or SmackDown at that point Women's Championship. Liv then challenges her for the championship at Mania next year, and that's when you finish the rise of Liv Morgan's story. Long term, makes sense. Is it going to happen? Probably not. This is just my idea of the WrestleMania and Takeover cards to this point, from what we know, and I'm kind of trying to glean off of some rumors, some dirt sheets, and whatnot. But now we get to the main show. I already have a problem with it. It'll be 16 matches long. No, wait, I do have the Raw. Never mind. It's 14 matches long. I thought I forgot the tag team titles. Apparently not. So let's start with the non-title matches. One that's pretty much all but confirmed at this point is Edge versus Randy Orton. Some sort of stipulation, no holds barred, no disqualification, straight fight, something along those lines is going to be the stip. It's going to be it's still surreal to me that Edge is back. After 9 years away, and now he's finally back again. That is a story I never thought would happen. So, that story has been going on and being written, has been written so well. And what I want to see is, let that continue to build, let that continue to grow, and then it gets to the point at Mania where you have nowhere else to go. You have the blow-off, and you have the return of the decade, essentially, where Edge gets the win. I don't know what Edge's trajectory is after WrestleMania. I don't know what Randy Orton's trajectory is after WrestleMania. I don't know where either of them go. Orton said that he's willing to let the younger guys get the spot on the overseas tours, and we are definitely getting the post-WrestleMania European tour probably this year. So, does Orton just sit that out? Or do we see him on that stage? We'll have to wait and see, figure that all out and whatnot. But that's then. That's post-WrestleMania. We're talking about possible WrestleMania matches. The other two rumored non-title matches are, let's see, you have AJ Styles versus The Undertaker and John Cena versus Elias. Let's start with the first one. So Undertaker apparently has gone on record and said that AJ Styles reminds him of is essentially the modern day Shawn Michaels, which is so high praise and very true. But it's always concerning with Undertaker because now you're at the point in his career where he doesn't perform as much, and also you don't really know how many more Mania moments he has left in him. Especially with the streak being gone, it's kind of taken a bit of the shine and luster away from him having a WrestleMania match. That being said, AJ Styles would be an opponent that can get him to a fantastic match. We'll see how this one builds. I think AJ name dropped Taker this week on Raw, so we'll see. It's still a very interesting sell to me, and I really need to wait and see, where this goes. And now for Cena Elias, it's hard to buy into that, but if they play their cards pretty well, I can see it working. essentially, with Elias being a face now, it makes it a little harder. So I say you do this. Cena's there on February 28th, which is next week? Yes, next week. You have Cena there for SmackDown next week. Elias comes out and says, with all due respect, John, I need to say this or get this off my chest, and let him say that you embarrassed me at WrestleMania last year. That wasn't really cool, and I want to settle things with a match. And that's how you get the match of Mania, essentially. Now, I still feel like Goldberg can get involved here, but the less Goldberg nowadays for me, the better. Not a fan of him challenging for the Universal Championship in Saudi Arabia, but So that's the non-title matches. But for the title matches, it's a lot more interesting. Let's start at the bottom and go up. The Women's Tag Team Championships. Kabuki Warriors versus... I literally have that written down on my paper. I don't know who they could face. There's such a lack of depth in the women's tag team division that you can't really see how Kabuki Warriors play into this year's Mania. Maybe it's Natalya and Beth Phoenix. I actually wouldn't mind that, especially imagine if they go over and Beth gets one more run with Edge in the WWE. That would be really nice to see. I don't think it'll happen, but that'd be nice to see. Maybe. She's still relatively young, I think. Edge is still pretty young, too. It surprised me when he said he was 46. But yeah, the women's tag team titles, you just don't know, really. You don't know who could really challenge the Kabuki Warriors. SmackDown tag team titles, I have New Day right now walking in as champions because of the fact that, they are champions. So, you have that. You have Miz and Morrison and the Usos and the Revival on SmackDown. Now, the Revival are essentially sitting out their contracts, waiting to leave. I think they continue to do that, and they don't even get a spot at WrestleMania this year. We'll see. So you still have an amazing triple threat possibility on your hands. You have New Day versus the Usos versus Miz and Morrison. Those three could tear the house down. Those three could put on one of the best tag team matches in a long time. We'll have to wait and see. But let's wait and see. You also look at SmackDown. Their tag team division's a little better off than Raw, especially because two guys who are singles wrestlers are tag team champions on Raw. But with how good we know New Day and Usos are, let's build up Miz and Morrison. Although I can easily see them going to Raw, partly because of Miz and Mrs. It's such a weird time for them to be back together because it's been so long, and now they're teaming together again. So there's that. But those three teams could easily put on a tag team clinic. What I want to see in triple threat tag team matches, let's start having all three teams have one member in the ring. I would like to see that. Let's do that. That's just me, though. But for the Raw tag team titles, getting Buddy Murphy Murphy. I actually don't mind this name change. I don't mind it a lot. Let's have Murphy and Rollins. They have a couple of routes they could go. I originally had written down Owens and Joe, but with Joe potentially rumored possibly being injured again, that pretty much rules that out. If Owens can find another tag team partner, then maybe. I don't really know who, though. Because I'm trying to think, who else have they wronged? Who has Rollins and Murphy wronged that could help Owens? I mean, the Viking Raiders also could be playing into this, which I wouldn't mind. Give them a big entrance. I jokingly said, take the ship off the stadium and let them come down with the ship. Because they're in Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay has a huge pirate ship in the stadium. You also Street Profits do play into here also. It's hard, but we can see it. But we'll figure that out when we get there. Right now, I think it makes more sense to have Owens involved, because otherwise he doesn't really get a match at Mania. Maybe Murphy and Rollins drop the titles to AOP in like some weird finish type thing where like Rollins or Murphy just lays down for him, and then Owens and Rollins get a singles match at Mania. But that leaves Murphy out, and I want Murphy to have a match. Oh wait, Murphy could work into another one, possibly. Who would I take out? Maybe just making a name. Who knows? So let's start now with the women's matches. Let's start with the SmackDown Women's Championship. Right now, rumored plan is Bayley defending against Naomi. There's still a possibility we see Bayley Sasha Banks. Although you could save that for SummerSlam, maybe. We'll see. It's also, this is the time of year where you want to see the big matches. And I think personally, Bayley and Sasha Banks is a bit of a bigger draw than Bayley and Naomi. That could also partly be because it's been so long since I've seen Naomi actually have a singles match. I'm trying to remember what she did last year. She was in the women's tag team chamber with Carmella. She was in the women's battle royal. And she was at Money in the Bank. And then my memory gets fuzzy and I don't remember. It's been a long time since I think we've seen Naomi in an actual singles match. So I'm not saying it wouldn't be a good match, but to me the draw is in the other match. In, Sasha versus Bayley. But I wouldn't mind Naomi. I'm not complaining about Naomi. I just don't remember Naomi's last singles match. It might be happening right now, actually, because I'm recording this during SmackDown. I haven't watched SmackDown recently. That's probably a problem. Raw Women's Championship match, I'm pretty sure we all know it's going to be Becky Lynch versus Shayna Baszler. And with the rumor going around that Becky and Seth might be taking a little time off after Mania, possibly to, actually get married instead of just being engaged. Who knows? It feels pretty obvious Becky drops the title here. It makes Shayna a big name right away. It makes her a legitimate threat, and I'm very excited to see it. You might actually start to see WWE start to build up people who aren't the four horsewomen in professional wrestling. So you start with Shayna Baszler and you continue to work on everybody else and go from there. Maybe it would make more sense for Ruby Riott to cash in on the SmackDown side now. I just think it does. We'll see. And also the NXT Championship match, NXT Women's Championship match. We already know this one. This is, I think, one of 2 confirmed WrestleMania matches so far. Rhea Ripley defending against Charlotte Flair. How big is this for Rhea Ripley? Let's just start with that. How big is this for her? She's been a pro wrestler for less than 5 years, I think. I'm actually going to double check this because I want to be factually correct. Because Rhea Ripley is one of my favorite women's wrestlers going right now. She is so talented. There's cage match. Let's go to search. Rhea Ripley. There. She has been a pro wrestler 7 years, excuse me. She's a 7-year pro wrestler, and she's already at WrestleMania. That is a big deal for her. She's been with the company for 3 or 4 years. That's where I was getting 5 from. That makes sense. I am very excited to see her on this big stage. It'll be the biggest stage she's been on, bar none. And I'm very excited to see what she can do against somebody like Charlotte Flair. So let's see where these two go, what they can do. I'm very excited for this feud. But speaking of NXT at WrestleMania, with Ciampa Gargano, why do I keep saying Ciampa Balor? With Ciampa Gargano main eventing NXT TakeOver, there's no way you can have the NXT title follow a Hell in a Cell loser leaves match. You would have to have that match. You had to have Balor Gargano. I did it again. You had to have Balor Cole at WrestleMania. So you have Adam Cole, who most of the fans who watch the main roster or only the pay-per-views now know. You have him go up to WrestleMania to defend against Finn Balor. And maybe we see the return of the Demon. Maybe this is where the Demon comes out. But also, it would signal Undisputed Era officially getting the call-up, because the only person that makes sense to take the title off of Adam Cole is Finn Balor. And we might see this start to build next week, because Balor said he's zooming in on his next target next week. We'll see. But I am very excited if that's the match, because 2 former members of Bullet Club going one-on-one. And with this heel Finn Balor, that is scary. Now we get to the United States Championship. Who's going to go into this match as champion is a bit of a question mark. We'll see. But I have it as a ladder match with Andrade, who is the current champion, defending against Aleister Black, Rey Mysterio, Ricochet, Rusev, Lashley, and either Angel Garza or Humberto Carrillo. We'll see. We don't know Garza's main roster status yet. Give these guys some time, and it would be fantastic. You have, at this point, I have written down 7 very capable wrestlers. If you just tell them, go out there and wrestle. That's all you need to do. Give them a time, and say just go do it. But also, to me, this could be like the coronation of Aleister Black, where we start to build Aleister up as that legitimate threat to everybody. And also, what I would love to see is him and Ricochet, former tag team partners. Imagine Ricochet and Aleister Black doing their fakes to the outside and somehow ending up looking at each other. That would be very interesting to see. And if that is an actual match we get at Mania, I'll explain more when we get there. I'm also trying to keep this shorter, so I'm kind of trying to breeze through these. Intercontinental Championship. I'm not a fan of Strowman being champion, but you have him walk in as champ. I have a fatal 4-way here. Strowman, Daniel Bryan, Sheamus, and Shinsuke Nakamura. I don't really know what the plan is for Strowman at Mania. It's kind of fuzzy at best right now. Possibly a 2-on-1 handicap with Nakamura and Cesaro. But I would rather see this fatal 4-way. Because then you add in the fact that Strowman doesn't have to be pinned to lose the title. You could easily see Bryan tap out on Nakamura. You could see Sheamus brogue kick Bryan. You could see Strowman get pinned by Daniel Bryan, for all we know. It's a really, really interesting matchup, I feel. So you look at it, you have this talent on SmackDown. Let's start to use some of them. And if you have someone like Bryan become Intercontinental Champion at Mania, you then can start to build up, likes of Ali, Chad Gable, Apollo Crews. These guys who, well, yes, we know they're pretty good wrestlers. They might not get a chance to show it, but we know they're pretty good wrestlers. Maybe you could help them develop a character in that aspect too. We'll see. And let's go with the next match that we actually already know for WrestleMania. The WWE Championship with Brock Lesnar defending against Drew McIntyre. Very excited, especially with Drew's natural just charisma pouring through right now. I am so excited for that. I am so happy for it. And I'm ready to see him become the first ever UK-born WWE champion. It's still weird to say that because you feel like British Bulldog could have won it. Wade Barrett could have won it. Neville could have won it. For people that don't know, Neville is now Pac in AEW. You have all this talent that have come from the UK that could have won it. Sheamus doesn't count because Ireland, besides what NXT UK wants to tell you, Ireland is not part of the UK. But yeah, McIntyre winning it would be a very nice shout. And it also would be somebody different, which is very nice to see. But speaking of people that are different, that's not the case for the Universal title. I hate that I harbor on Roman so much. I really like what Roman does. Roman's not a bad wrestler. He's just in a horrible situation where he's the face of the company when he didn't ask to be the face of the company, but Vince made him it. I can probably make that a whole podcast on itself. But you have him challenging Bray Wyatt for the Universal title. That's a very interesting one because you don't. It still feels too early for the Fiend to lose, but it would also have to be where Roman finally gets back to the mountaintop. You have the story that he had to leave because of cancer, he came back, and now he wants to get back on top. I like the story. It's interesting, and it's there. But you have to handle the Fiend losing correctly. It has to be done right. You could just have him lose and just lay there. For example, have him lose, and then you have him... You have, like, Roman win. This obviously wouldn't be the main event, because this would be a weird way to end the show. You have Roman win the title, Roman's celebrating, lights go off, you hear the laughter, lights come back on, Wyatt's just gone. Like, not there. Bray Wyatt himself shows up the next night the next week on SmackDown. But maybe we don't see the Fiend until SummerSlam time. Who knows? We'll see. But that's my WrestleMania and Takeover Tampa Bay ideas. This is a lot longer than I had hoped, but I just started rambling and ranting about wrestling again. It feels nice to actually just sit around and talk about wrestling sometimes. Thank you guys so much for listening. You can follow myself on Twitter at Churro Soldier. You can follow this podcast, the podcast Armchair. You can follow All Things Combat on Twitter at Things Combat, where we cover professional wrestling, boxing, and MMA. We got some stuff going on these next few weeks. Some exciting new articles, some interesting stuff. We'll see. We also have a merch store, which will be linked in the description below. We buy hats, hoodies, t-shirts. I think we have coffee mugs now. I know we still have mouse pads, phone cases. We have weird stuff on there too. So there's that. You can also follow the Cauldron at Cleveland State on Twitter at CSU Cauldron, where I'm the sports editor at. My most recent story, which is about both men's and women's golf, will be linked in the description below. And I don't think I'm forgetting anything this time. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you like what you heard, hit the like button. If you really like what you heard, hit subscribe. You can leave a comment. You can hit me up on Twitter. Anywhere. I'm always willing to talk more pro wrestling. And yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. I'll be back next week with a topic that I've kind of wanted to talk about for a little while, but I didn't know when it would be a good time. It involves NXT, and I've kind of teased it a little bit here and there throughout this episode. But I'll leave the actual idea until next week. I'll see you guys then.